welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan, your host and Executive Director of CyberUp. Very excited about today's conversation with Reanna Schultz out of Garmin. Reanna, welcome so much to the show today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. I think we've been wanting to do this for a couple of weeks now, so I'm excited for us to deep dive. I believe we discussed on talking about getting into cyber and kind of a little bit about backgrounds and some directions you can go to job hunt.
I know I was quickly reminded of just how small the space is as we in prep for this today. In the 5 minutes we hopped on here, the 90 people we knew in common is just really crazy of how small the InfoSec community is.
Absolutely. And I remember when I was getting into InfoSec, someone very early on in my career, they had said, your net worth is your network. And especially, I mean, we're in the Midwest area a little bit, so cyber is a super small community here. Everyone knows someone that has known someone.
Well, I'm excited to jump into the idea of just how we break in. But first, it's always a great idea to know who we're talking to and to get to know a little bit about yourself. So, Reanna, I'd love for you to take a second just to introduce yourself a little bit more and just to talk about how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I have been in the cybersecurity field for a little over 6.5 years now. And it's always interesting hearing about other people's journeys, where they got to, how they ended up in cyber. And with me, I grew up in a super small town in Missouri. There was more cows than population is how I like to compare it. In fact, we didn't have any stoplights or turn lanes. That's how small of a town was. So when I eventually moved out, I was 17. I decided to go start my adult journey early on figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember I was 16 and my parents had sat me down. They're like, hey, you're about to graduate high school. What do you want to do? And that's such a big question, asking a teenager, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? You're 16. You just had your driver's license for 6 months. Like, how am I supposed to plan the next 60 years? I don't even know what a 401k is at 16, let alone RSU and stocks. So what I did, I went to a career fair that my high school was having. And STEM wasn't really something that was promoted in my town. It was very common for people to talk about agricultural business, being involved in FFA and, just doing that side of the house, or even more important, law enforcement, which is what I originally thought I was wanting to do. And when I attended this career fair, they had a state highway patrolman, and he was so passionate about his job and how excited he was. And I was like, wow. I was like, I want to do something like that where I'm going to be super passionate. I'm going to be excited and everything. So I had an opportunity during my upbringing to graduate high school early. And I said, yeah, why not? I have an idea of what I want to do with my life. It sounds easy enough. And of course, at 16, 17, it's just an easy idea. That's how things happen, right? And, we know that's not true. You have road bumps and blocks and stuff like that. And when I went home and I told my parents, I was like, hey, I'm going to graduate early. This is what I want to do. And I think I want to go to college. And they're like, have fun. We're supporting you, but you're going to have to pay for everything on your own. You're going to have to figure out how to pay for tuition. You're going to have to figure out your own colleges and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, college is expensive once you start doing research. And I realized I would not be able to afford a very D1 college, like a state university. So I was looking around and I knew I didn't want to go out of state, right? Because that's going to be more expensive. And I settled on a university called the University of Central Missouri. This college was very well known for their criminal justice program. And again, I didn't know why I wanted to go to college. I was just told over and over again, through my high school counselors or even middle school counselors, where they're like, hey, you need to start thinking about, universities. A college degree will help you get a job. You start having this perception in your head that you go attend college and you'll get a job right after college. And so that's why I settled on UCM. They're very well known for criminal justice. They seem to be very active in the community, and UCM was affordable for me as well. So I went ahead and enrolled into the spring semester. I had graduated fall of 2014 from high school, went straight into UCM, moved out of my parents' no idea what I was doing. And I started taking my criminal justice classes. And I realized I did not like criminal justice classes. It was reading a lot of law, a lot of legal jargon, and I thought it was the most boring thing ever, which is ironic now because you're in cyber and you have to know policies and everything. But I was like, I can't do this for the next 4 years of my college career. And so I decided to go and think about some self-reflection points. One thing I enjoyed about that career fair, right, was how passionate that state highway patrolman was about their job. And so I thought to myself, what are things I'm passionate about? And around that time, I was very into weightlifting. I did bodybuilding for a couple of years in college, and I said, maybe I'm going to go into physical therapy, right? I enjoy working out. I enjoy, making workout regimens for people. This is something I'm very excited about. And so I transferred and started taking physical therapy classes. And my first class was anatomy. And I was like, this is not exciting to me. This is not fun. And I actually ended up failing my anatomy class just because I wasn't into my studies. It wasn't exciting. But when you go through college, you have to take, they call them elective classes. And one of the elective classes I took was Python programming. And these classes aren't really geared towards your primary degree, but it gives you some diversity into your college path, like art or public speaking and stuff like that. I took Python programming. Again, I did not program in high school. I had no idea about anything with programming. I played video games, right? But I didn't understand the mechanics. And when I took this Python programming class, I fell in love with it. And I realized criminal justice and anatomy, it's very textbook studying. It's very, this is the right answer. This is not the right answer. This is yes or no. With programming, I was able to allow myself have creative avenues to find a solution. And that made me so excited because it allowed me to have out of the box thinking, allowed me to essentially troubleshoot in my own way and find my own way as a programmer. So going into Python programming, I found my way into computer science and then eventually into cybersecurity. And during my studies, right, you don't get a book on how to graduate college and how to get a job, right? There's no book like this. And having podcasts and conferences is a great avenue because it gives you some inspiration and insight, especially if you're a college student or even someone trying to get the industry and you're like, I'm not having any luck. I was in that same boat at some point. And towards the end of my studies, I started really thinking about how am I going to get a job? Like, I don't know how to get a job. I don't even know how to write a resume. And luckily, I always say, things are meant to happen for a reason. I was very involved in our American Computing Machinery Club, ACM, if you've ever heard of that. But we had brought someone in from a local business that talked about their journey into the industry. And one thing he had mentioned is get involved in the community. And so at the very end of his talk, I went up to him, and he's a CISO now at a company that's very well known. But I shook his hand. I said, "Holy cow, you inspired me. I didn't know I'm supposed to go out and talk to people. I didn't know I'm supposed to make connections." And he said, "Okay, well, why don't you come out to this panel that we're having?" And he goes, there's a couple of people on this panel. We're talking about resume building. We're talking about getting into the field, skills that we're looking for, an entry level, and then how you can grow your career. I think it'll be beneficial. Take a couple of your friends, come on out. And I said, okay. And he goes, bring your resume because there's going to be a recruiting firm there that can help you and, or at least give you some guidance with your resume. And I said, okay, sounds good. This panel was in a couple of weeks. I have never written a resume in my life. And so, of course, like the first thing I did was go to Google and type how to write a resume or resume template. And I'm looking at all these different samples. I'm like, this doesn't look like what I want. I just want something simple and basic, and then I can build my portfolio onto there. So my very first resume, I should have kept it and frame it because to me, that was the first stepping stone into my journey and who I am today. But I had written my resume. It's very small, it was one paragraph. And the only work experience I had on there was a Buffalo Wild Wings waitress for 2 years. And I went to this panel with a couple of my friends. And this panel, it was awesome. There was a female panelist that's been in the field for some time. She does a lot of policy and risk work. The other guy that was talking to our college students, he was on there talking about his journey and how he's building a team. And then, of course, like a gal who worked on a local recruiting firm. And they talked about how being involved in the community and what skills you can get. And of course, this is a very intimidating thing for someone who's never really talked to anyone outside of like my teachers or even my peers. And at the very end of this panel discussion, I went up to the gal that worked at the recruiting firm, and I shook her hand. And of course, like I was shaking. And this is very outside of my comfort zone. And I said, "Hi, my name's Reanna. I'm a college student. I'm graduating next year. Can you just look at my resume?" And she goes, "Yeah, absolutely." And she had a big old pink purse. I remember this. And she opened up the purse, took out a red pen, and destroyed my entire resume. I was appalled.
Not the red pen. Come on now. That's crazy.
Everything.
Who carries a red pen in a pink purse, by the way? That's a statement in itself.
But I'm telling you what, as scary and as intimidating as that was, she gave me a lot of insight on how to build a resume, you know, calling out things like, hey, for example, I was a waitress, right? I served people. That's literally a bullet I had. And she was like, why don't we expand this into providing customer service, even in difficult situations, you know, being able to serve 8 tables with 16 people in a 20-minute span while also doing XYZ, right? So now you're putting numeric identifiers to your fast-paced environment to put some weight. And I said, okay, cool, you know, like, thanks. And she goes, just letting you know, there's a conference. It was B-Sides Kansas City. She goes, there's a conference coming up. I'm going to have a table there for women in security, you know, come back up if you just want to chat, you know, stuff like that. And I was like, okay, you know, awesome, cool. And I went to B-Sides, and it was the most life-changing thing I've ever had, because again, right, beginning of my journey, I talk about how I was inspired by a passionate person. People at these conferences that go and talk, they are so passionate with the topic they're talking about. They're passionate to be in cyber. They're proud to be part of this community. And I, like, the light bulb just switched for me. And I said, this is why I'm in this field, you know, because I'm excited. I'm excited to go study and do my homework. Like, if I wasn't excited to be in this field, I wouldn't be putting myself out there and meeting people I completely don't even know, just to hear their journey and how they got there and ways to do. And because I did that, it allowed me to meet, we talk about small community, you know, I met someone who knew someone whose wife worked at a Fortune 50 company, and they reached back out to me for an internship because of like how I was communicating or what I was wanting into a job. And that little small 5 to 10 minute moment allowed me to land my first internship, which allowed me to land my first job, and then allowed me to tumbleweed into landing eventually here at Garmin. So it's a very, I want to say, a very exciting journey, but there was a lot of lessons learned from who I was to where I became today.
Why? So let's unpack some of that, because I think what you just described is still very relevant to today, right? I think the nature of how people are doing. I know you did exactly what we tell every person that comes into our program to go do. Like, you've got to make friends. You've got to get out there. You got to do more than just the learning in the classes, right? Like that's great that you get the skills. You got to put your skills to action. Then you got to show people you have the skills, and you got to convince them you have the skills to get the job, because it is really competitive. What do you think is the biggest difference between your start then and now from expectations from employers? Do you think they're similar, or do you think they've changed?
They've changed, right? And that's also part of this field. Technology changes, the job changes. I mean, 2 years ago, I wouldn't even be talking about AI, every other buzzword, right? I would say, you know, people trying to get into the industry today, they have more resources and everything else compared to when I first started, which was 2018 is when I had my first job. You know, like back then, it was word of a mouth to know someone to get it involved into something. And now, especially with social media and advertising and just how technology is built and utilized today, people know when conferences are, there's Discord groups that are literally promoting mentorship and, allowing, hey, we're looking for someone with this. Oh, hey, I have a free voucher code for a Try Hack Me Lab if someone wants to like get in there, I'm not going to use it. And we have like such a supportive community on this virtual platform. And honestly, I think COVID really helped ramp that up. But having such a supportive community, in my opinion, it wasn't what it is today that it was when I first started. So having that, in my opinion, sets a lot of people up for success if they choose to use those types of tools.
I know the meetup scene here, we were on the other side of the state in St. Louis, is definitely very different than it was pre-COVID, right? There was a lot more. I think we had a DEF CON chapter. I think we had a BC. We don't have any of those anymore. They all they went away. And that's not just, and that's just not to feel like I'm attacking cyber broadly. A lot of meetup groups in multiple sectors, right? We were talking to a young nonprofit professional network, which is a great organization, but the chapter kind of fell apart during COVID just because I think people are much more mindful of their time when they leave and what they do.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know what soapbox long, but I think COVID made people really mindful of their time and intentionality with their time and the value that it has and the importance of being home and how, and they, to figure out what they do in the absence of that, I think has really made the event stuff hard because you really got to have something compelling or meaning to get somebody out of their comfort zone or to go, hear me out, put on pants from sweatpants in the house, right? If you're working remote. Now, most companies are going 2 to 3 days or 4 days a week in the office, so it's getting a little better. But I know, for me, if I go back in the office full time, I'm going to be tired as all get out just because I got to retrain my body to do that. Mainly the commute piece of it, more though than anything, not the work day, the commute day. Love that.
It's like I'm pretty sure my step count during COVID was like 2,000, and then when I came back in the office, I'm averaging like 10 to 15. Yeah. And I'm telling you what, I don't know, like if you went up a flight of stairs after COVID, I was definitely out of breath. For the first 6 months of returning back to office, I was like, "Whoa, man!" I was like, my fridge was way shorter to walk.
And even in the absence, you mentioned a couple of things, just the community aspect of it, right? Because there is. I'm former military, and it's the one sector for me that I just have felt like it's very team oriented.
Yeah.
One team, one fight. There's a camaraderie there that comes along with it. And the good news is that hasn't changed. I think I've noticed, and I'll pass the question to you of like, since the job market has tightened up a little bit, willingness for people to do those kinds of things seems to be a little different because, when there was a job market was aplenty, I wasn't really worried about losing my job to somebody because things were good. And now things are a little bit different. I don't know if you're noticing. Have you noticed a downward trend in just kind of willingness to help others? And, as the job market has transitioned and slowed down?
Yeah, and I want to say probably not like a downtrend in helping, but it's more like I think people are now a little hesitant to ask, right? We in this community, we're very, in my opinion, very open, very collaborative. I mean, for example, like you and I, Tony, this is the first time I'm really talking to you. So and I'm just like, hey, let's go. But one thing is just going out there and asking, and again, putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable, taking those risks. And nobody wants to fail. Nobody wants to fail in their life at anything. And I failed a lot. I failed a lot of interviews. I failed a lot of pushbacks on stuff, and maybe how I projected an idea and whatnot. But to me, I think now it's just more of, how do I get those resources and stuff like that? Even on my GitHub, if you link my LinkedIn, my GitHub's linked to my LinkedIn, just to help people out with their resume. I do a lot of STEM talks. I made a GitHub repo of just a resume template, right? That's free to use. People don't have to bug me and ask me for career advice. How do I start? I don't know how to make a resume. Here's a template. Literally download it, copy it, and change it with your information. And that's just a first step, getting yourself out in there. One thing that, and we kind of talked about a little bit of this before we started recording, but even on the hiring side of stuff, it's almost like some people don't know what they want to hire. And they're like, well, I want someone that does vulnerability, incident response, detection engineering. Oh, don't forget the SIM and SOAR management. And then it's just like, well, I only have a budget of $60,000 for this one person. And nobody wants to get paid $60,000 to be the unicorn. Like that's a lot of time. That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of money. And so as a hiring manager, right, just understanding where your priorities are is going to help gear that job description and everything else. And I might rabbit hole into the subject a little bit, but there's a framework that NIST posts, and it's called the NIST NICE framework. And it's an absolute fantastic framework. Even if you're an individual contributor, you can use this framework as to be like, okay, I want to be a defense analyst. Okay, this is where my skill set is. Framework says I need to be comfortable with reading logs, identifying alerts, or triaging, calling when an incident's an incident. You need to be confident in those skills. And then also kind of highlights a little bit of the soft skills, right? Presenting on a brief, hey, something happened in our network. I need to go tell someone about it. This was the impact. This is how many hosts were infected and blah, blah, blah. Having that as an individual contributor can help gear towards where you're going to put investment into yourself. And again, I go back to highlighting your passions. We can learn all of the different corners of cybersecurity, but knowing what excites you can help gear towards what you're going to be excited to learn. Cyber stressful. It just is, especially if you're on the incident response side, you're first responders for a business. But knowing what you like and enjoy, that's where you can start putting your energy and effort in. Now, going on the flip side with the hiring manager, knowing exactly where you want to start, right? Look at bigger scope. You're going to burn someone out during like wearing 8 different hats. I have been in a 8 different hat role and I was exhausted. I was tired at the end of the day. I didn't even want to watch TV because I just want to sit and just relax. But having that job description geared towards the most impactful thing. Okay, well, maybe we need to get logging. Okay, so now I'm going to be focusing on hiring someone who might be experienced with logging, understanding what API calls are, syslog, understanding parsing, because then that baseline foundation is what's going to help start building those monitoring and detecting and going into that, or maybe, hey, we just deployed EDR in our environment. I have no idea how to manage this. Okay, well, maybe we need someone that understands threat signatures, etc. And using that NIST NICE framework, especially if this is very new to your business, will help gear towards how you're writing those job descriptions. And then also kind of help gear towards what years of experience is really going to look like. And there have been so many times where I have read job descriptions and it's calling for an entry-level analyst, but then it's requiring 5 to 10 years of experience, or it's saying that you need to have like 10 years of management but you also need to be comfortable. And I'm like, that's not an entry-level position. And now there's a bunch of red flags to that company, because if the company didn't take the time to write this job description, are they going to take the time to know me as a person? Are they going to take the time to invest in me? Or there's all these other questions. So it goes both ways on that spectrum of, hey, how do I build myself? And then on the hiring side, hey, how do I attract? And then also, how do I maintain that talent? So again, that NIST NICE framework, in my opinion, is a good way to start if you really don't know where to begin.
Yeah, cyberseek.org is a great page to go look at that. That'll map out your career paths. Yep. I also reference CyberSN.
Yes.
They have a really good breakdown of, I think, 45, the last one I saw, 45 or so different roles that range from sales to coding to super technical hacking, right? Like there's a wide range. And I think, most people coming into it think pen testing and SOC 90% of the time, or GRC and compliance things those are great starters to get into. They don't require a ton of technical skills, but you can learn the systems and process and grow your technical skills as you go, right? It's a great precursor. Man, that was a great answer, by the way, and a good reference around NICE and NIST is always a good staple. What are some things, as you were saying this, I feel like there are different journeys for different people, right? Like you had a journey, you went, more traditional, and there's non-traditional, and I think those are a little different. there's different systems for a college student. There's a different system for somebody in our program or somebody who's on their own, right? That's just trying to hop on the interwebs and teach themselves and get some certs and then try to go out there and do it.
Yeah.
You know, there are a couple kind of evergreen ideas of things that each person should go do to, like, in either of those scenarios, like I need to go do this, this, and this as that's non-negotiable to get myself out there and meet a few people to try to break in.
Yeah. Elise, and again, right, I do a lot of STEM talks, and college isn't for everyone, right? It might be whether it's your environment situation, your financial situation, your interests, right? Not everyone wants to go to college for 4 years and study and have textbooks. But again, reflecting on, hey, yeah, cyber sounds cool. Cyber's really speaking to me, it's calling to me, or maybe you accidentally stumbled into it. Going from, okay, this is cyber, and then gearing towards that specific corner that you really want to pursue. There's vulnerability management. You know, we talked about policies, risk, security education, app security, network security, you know, cloud security. People are still figuring that out. And who knows, AI security is probably going to be a thing in a couple of years next. But understanding what really interests you, and then that can also help you build that platform and everything else. And again, outside of college, you can there's a lot of cool tools for you to explore those different avenues and figure out what is your interest. I mentioned this earlier, tryhackme.com. This is a great platform to use where they have hands-on labs and you can experience and expose yourself to those different corners without paying for that college education. Hack the Box, right? This is another cool free platform to use where if pen testing's more of your speed, then you can go in and learn more about pen testing and all this other stuff. So understanding and getting exposed to these different elements will help guide towards on how to invest in yourself. Now it's hard because now you're talking about certifications, you're talking about maybe getting experience like internships and everything else. I will forever quote, there's this guy named Josh Fulmer on LinkedIn, and I will quote him till probably the day I retire. Certifications get you the interview. Certifications do not get you the job. And that highlights, you know, you can make yourself look good on paper, but at the end of the day, you know, soft skills also go a very good way. Soft skills help build that. And then don't forget the culture aspect, right? Hiring managers already have an established team. So how are you going to integrate with that current team? How are you going to integrate with high stress situations? And so now it's like, how do you expose yourself to that and build those soft skills and those high stress situations in a way without being in the industry? And there's a lot of ways you can do this. I always promote, again, you know, influencing yourself, building your brand, go to conferences, apply for a call for paper, right? You don't have to be a industry expert to talk at conferences or a local security club. I went to a conference not too long ago. There was a 17-year-old girl talking about studies that she has done regarding AI and vulnerability management. And again, right, she was so excited and passionate, and she's building those soft skills. She's building those public speaking. She's putting herself in a stressful situation because people are going to have questions at the end of her talk, right? And knowing how to communicate to a different diverse group of people, building those soft skills. Also, right, you learn a lot applying for conferences to talk. Your writing and everything else. And I remember when I was in college, I was like, oh, I'm never going to write, you know, I'm taking a technical writing class, you know, blah, blah, blah. Hate to tell you, you have to write in this field. You have documentation, you have mentorship, right? You have to maybe write an email to discuss something that's very high level to someone that's not even going to understand what an antivirus is, right? That's just the world we live in, believe it or not. And so having those exposures, like writing blogs or even, you know, make a YouTube video and talk about walking through a Try Hack Me lab or a Hack the Box lab, right? Those are building soft skills. And again, you can put those things on your resume. You can link them, like GitHub, right? If you're working on coding projects on the side, link your GitHub, because now this is you getting experience and branding yourself. So that way a hiring manager knows a little bit more about you than just a Sec Plus or a boot camp certification.
I'm always a big fan of encouraging lab building at home, right?
Yeah,
you could do a cloud-based lab pretty cost effectively.
Yeah.
Drop in a couple simulated machines, for poops and giggles, right? Get a YouTube channel, walk through what you're doing, right, in that piece. So now you're not just doing it, you're showing people you know how to do it. And it's a really great way to highlight your skills, because it is hard.
It is.
One thing in 8.5 years for me here of like, how do I help somebody show what they can do in absence of just telling somebody what I could do? Because it's really what happens in an interview. And then, unfortunately, it depends on your interviewer. How they're trying to stump you or not try to stump you, right? Are they trying to catch you up on something? And a lot of times they really just want you to say, I don't know, I'll go find the answers, really what they're looking for. Right. So trying to find those right things and find the ways for you to learn some answers. I'm still flashing back to the red pen, by the way, because I have PTSD from when I first started getting into this, and my writing was atrocious, and lots of reading just to get better and understanding, because it is an important skill, whether you are technical or not technical. The ability to communicate articulately and concisely and clearly in an email is really, really important, especially in this role as you might have a really stressful situation you're trying to convey via email to an executive. How do you write that and in a way that's going to be all those things clear and concise?
And I think I hear this now. It's like, oh, I'll do editing through ChatGPT or Copilot and all these things. I'm like, that's cool, but you can't put company data on these open source tools, because now, hey, if you're writing a pen test report, okay, well, now you're just giving that pen test report to an open source tool to store in their database. Like, you have no control what's going on. It's still a service. So building those soft skills early on goes a long way.
Well, I'm committed to one episode to not say that 30 minutes goes fast, but we are at 30 minutes. But everybody gets the same last question. So the question is, what advice would you give to somebody looking to level up their cybersecurity career?
Yeah, always think about your passion. Pursue your passions, because if you're going to be doing something that doesn't excite you, it's going to burn you out. Finding what really is your interest, because again, I said this earlier in the podcast, cyber is such a collaborative community, and being able to contribute back to your community is such a wonderful feeling. And it's even more better when it's something you're excited about, because when you talk about something that you're excited about, it gets other people very excited and want to follow what you're doing as well.
Passion is infectious. It always is, right? You gave two examples of passion and where you got inspired by those folks in your own story. So it really is an important part of this. But I want to say thank you so much for your time today and just the words of wisdom. And I think really great advice for folks that are looking to break into it and sharing your story. And hopefully, one of many conversations down the road. So I encourage everybody. I'm going to assume that if somebody's interested, to reach out or have questions or look for your resume or find your GitHub, your LinkedIn profile will be obviously here, but reach out if you have questions and go from there. But thank you for joining us. Thank you everybody for listening. Until we tune in next time, have a great week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.